Oh, hey, man, I was going to say it's taking forever and it just snapped on. Episode 123, This is Life in Tech. I'm Jason.
I'm Dan.
And I'm TK.
Our dear friend TK is back. These are my favorite shows, man. And by the way, for the record, I looked through all 122 episodes prior to this, and your appearances, TK, are the highest rated in terms of viewership, length viewed, so forth and so on. So
go ahead, Dan.
Well, I mean, because when we have a guest on, is basically TK.
Well,
and Ken always brings our ratings low because of those stupid AirPods.
The guy's not even here, man, and you're just giving him shit.
Hey, just because he's not here does not exclude him from being harassed from the AirPods. I was just glad the last time we had Ken on, he actually finally got rid of those AirPods. They were probably out of batteries or something, or the battery was low.
I don't know, man. I was thinking about buying a pair the other day. Not the Apple, but just like a third-party brand like that. I'm like, I'll never be able to wear them on here.
I mean, you could wear them. I'm waiting for you to do what Bonnie said is, and have your Caterpillar have its own Twitter account.
Man, that's a good idea. Listen, you got to understand how many compliments I get because I've tried mustaches before. You know what I mean? And I always shave it off because I think I look like a menace to society, let's say. And man, dude, I get so many compliments now from dudes. Like, what's that? I don't know.
It's good hair game.
I guess so, man. Like, I was in a meeting on Thursday night and I never met this guy before in my life. He sat down beside me. We were having a meal. And he's like, man, I'm really envious of your mustache. And this dude had a healthy goatee.
Was it Tom Selleck?
It was not. Hey, listen, speaking of Tom Selleck, you know, I lived not far from him when I lived in Thousand Oaks.
Is that L.A.?
Yeah, north of L.A., just south of Santa Barbara. I used to run into him like in the little, we had a local version of a Home Depot that was a little smaller. He used to be in there getting stuff for his ranch.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I didn't have a mustache then. He did.
Well, of course. I'm trying to think of this one other guy is always talking about his mustache. Older guy. He was on that the movie Mask about Rocky Dennison.
I know the movie. I have no idea who the fuck you're talking about.
Oh, he wasn't as old then. I'll get his name. Don't worry. There's this thing called Google. We got this.
So, you know, it's interesting you're using your phone. I was thinking about this last night and today. If you could only take one piece of technology to an island and look, you're just going to spend the rest of your life on that island. And you got solar, so you can charge things. You have electricity. So, right, there's no, like, using coconuts to build a radio, like the professor at Gilligan's Island.
Sam Elliott.
Oh, Sam Elliott. Dude, yeah, man. That guy makes good music, too.
Yeah.
Does he really?
I think so. Or am I thinking of Chris Christopherson? I don't know. I get those two.
You're thinking of Chris Christopherson.
Snoop Dogg.
Jesus Christ. One piece of technology. What would you take? Would you take your mobile?
I'd take Google. I'm trapped on an island.
He's already starting to be difficult this morning. Doesn't take long. First question, done.
Google. That way, and I'm on a stranded island. These hands don't do manual labor. I'm going to have to figure out how to do everything. So,
well, but be specific. In what form? Like you're taking a Google Home? You're taking your Android mobile?
I'm hoping they've got it as a cybernetic eye at that particular point in time. The robots are coming. I'm telling you.
What do you mean that? God damn it, man! What do you mean they're coming? They're already here. Like I don't understand the conversation.
You don't even know. That's what the Democrats are running on now.
Oh boy. And we just started to drive down the road the wrong way. Dan's on the left side. He's just throwing hubcaps off the car. The lug nuts are flying off.
Have you ever driven down the road and somebody's coming the wrong way? I have.
Yeah.
And there's people that when they see the first car, they're like, oh shit, I'm on the wrong side. Let me stop and like try to turn around. And then there's people that are either willingly oblivious or so confident that everybody else is wrong and they're right, that they just keep going. And Dan's that guy. Dan's that guy. Yeah, fuck it. Everybody else is wrong. I'm just going to keep this show going.
Right. Hashtag I play chicken.
Yeah. They will move. Well, you've got to, in reality, a piece of technology, is electricity exist on this island already?
Yeah, man. You got solar, whatever. It doesn't matter.
It's been asked and answered there, counselor.
Well, hey, gotta know. Because if without electricity, it doesn't matter what the rest of the technology. Yeah, I mean, I think the most obvious answer is the right one, and be your phone. You've got everything right there that you would need to be able to do essentially anything.
I think I take my phone too, man.
Yeah. I think today it's kind of challenging to not. I mean, it is a computer. It's extremely powerful. We know it'll last at least 3 years if it's if you have the right case on it, a nice lovely Otter box, you don't have to worry about it, water, sand, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's got everything that you need, and Google. Definitely not bringing an Apple phone.
Well, I'll tell you what I increasingly like, man, because I have the Pixel 3 XL. What I increasingly like is the necessity for me to read or give manual input to it is dramatically declining. Like, you can just have almost a conversation with it, and it'll have a conversation with you. And man, that's a beautiful thing for me.
The AI has gotten better.
Yeah. Oh, dude, the Google Assistant is light years ahead of everybody else. Light years ahead.
I think, if you look about, you talk about people and how dependent they are on their mobile devices now. I mean, think about it the other day, the chairman or CEO of United Airlines basically came out and had a whole conversation revolving around how they just can't seem to get Wi-Fi together on an airplane. I fly Delta all the time, and I'm a T-Mobile customer. I got free text and messaging and internet when I'm on the plane. And I said, and yesterday, you wait, like now with the high-speed Wi-Fi, it's usually from the ground to the ground, right? You used to have to wait till 10,000 feet. Yeah. We were on an older plane for the second flight yesterday. We had to wait till 10,000 feet, and people were like, looking like you took their birthday away when they had to wait 10 minutes.
I never understood why 10,000 feet. Never ever really looked into it, but.
It's like some arbitrary number somebody said 20 years ago when they started it, and it just kind of stuck.
Kind of like how a cell phone caused an airplane to blow up.
Well, I mean, look how long it took to actually get to be able to use your devices. You know what I mean?
It's fear of anything.
Well, look. It's one of those funny things where, like, do you want to be the guy that stands up and says, hey, yeah, go ahead and use your devices, and it turns out actually they do crash planes? I mean, nobody wants to be that guy, right?
What do you mean? There's the CEO of Boeing.
Well, I guess that was the opposite. I mean, that wasn't that he let somebody use their devices. Well, that he wanted to charge them for the add-ons.
No, evidently, as it's coming out, there were people at Boeing that had said that there were safety issues in the 737, Supermax, and they were ignored internally at Boeing and kept on going.
I mean, we've crashed a couple space shuttles because of that too.
Yeah. Everything goes down once Alan Mulally leaves the company. Boeing, Ford.
Well, put it in perspective, though. I mean, this is what's crazy, like this bullshit with the rise of robots and AI and the proliferation of AI ethics committees that get disbanded a week later at Google. Don't get me started.
I think we just did.
Yeah, man. Oh, the brakes are gone, man. They're out of fluid. Here we go. So, like,
are you gonna run on the platform that we need to expand the use of AI and robots?
Yes.
For part of the the Northern Territory of the Carolinas.
The United Territory. The United Territory.
And, right. So right now you're in the Northern Territory. I mean,
what are you, a Confederate general?
He's going to unite the Carolinas. There'll be only one Carolina.
What? I don't have to. It's already done. What's the name of the football team? The Carolina Panthers. not the North Carolina Panthers,
So then
not the South Carolina Panthers.
Do you make BC a state at that point so we don't have to change the stars, or Puerto Rico?
Well, you know where I'm standing. I want Kosovo, USA.
But okay, man. Look, how many robots are used on a daily basis? Like I talked about this months ago when I had a friend take me to the Daimler Chrysler Freightliner factory, and it was small in terms of its square footage and the number of robots they have, and it was eye-opening.
So like robot like R2D2 or
the arms that you would probably guess they have being an auto manufacturer, right? The big robotic arms are like 7 feet tall.
The ones that move on their own, you give it a job, and it's or is it something like on an assembly line that it's just an extension of someone else?
The big arms are the assembly line. So instead of a human being there spot welding a hood, the robotic arm's doing it. It's pre-programmed, right?
Okay, all right.
That was horrifying in its precision, because it's just like this huge row of these 7 foot tall robotic arms, man. That was cool, but horrifying. What was really interesting, which is the stuff that I think that would trip other people out, is, so, I mean, being German, they're super efficient, right? And the way the factory is laid out, part of the factory, the floor moves and the humans don't, right? So you're not walking around. The stuff moves around you when you're working on it. And so there's another part of the factory where all the parts are for that. And of course, if you're not going to have the humans move over here because it's inefficient and dangerous and so forth and so on, it makes sense that you wouldn't want the humans to walk down to the other side of the factory and bring the parts back, right? So the way they do it is, instead of having a human drive the forklift is basically a giant Roomba. And it's completely automated, man. And this thing, I watched it for a long time, would drive down these rows, and it had an IR scanner, and it would scan barcodes on the shelves. And when it got to where it was supposed to be, a little light would flick on so the human could see that it was doing what it was supposed to be doing. And the bins would tilt and drop parts off into this forklift towing something, and the thing would just go around. And eventually it got back to where it was supposed to be, where they needed the parts. But it was like right on time, man. Like as you would naturally be reaching down to pick up a cable harness, that thing showed up and it was right there. And it immediately left, and it wasn't there early or anything. It was beautiful.
But that's, I mean, if you look at the Port of Rotterdam right now, it's extremely automated. Ports of Virginia right here, probably other than New York, the biggest ports on the East Coast, and some of the biggest in the world. And they got longshoremen as far as the eye can see. You go to Rotterdam, and it's these little big Roombas, probably a good idea, and everything's built into the concrete, and it just moves around. And I don't think we're to a point where the big gantry cranes that go over ships. I mean, that's an art, and it's the reason those guys get paid a couple $100,000 a year, to try not to either wreck the ship or wreck other containers. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but just moving stuff around from A to B all the time, you got to automate it. I mean, if you look at, like, when you talk about the auto industry, I think one of the most interesting things is when, and like his name escapes me, he just passed away. I think he was the Italian CEO of Fiat Group, who, when they inherited Chrysler, he effectively became the CEO of both entities, right? And what he did was, the first thing he did was look at Chrysler and their cars, and you only had to look as far as the Chrysler 300. The reason they were losing customers, in his estimation, was the first piece was fit and finish. Your eye finds mistakes a long time before you actually can go measure them. And he had some, chief designer that was closer to retirement than not. And he basically said, "Okay, thanks for your time." And he got, 38, year old-ish, new head designer. And the first thing he did was go, "Look, this hood's not on straight." Automation puts that hood on straight, because your eyes will pick up the differences in the lines between the fenders and the hood not being correct a long time before that. Then he went out and did fit and finish. I mean, that in itself, because Chrysler always would be like, "Oh, we have Hemi engines, we stand on our powertrain," and all that stuff. People don't buy a powertrain; they buy something cool they can show their friends. And the easiest way to get there was to get them automated. I mean, he did a whole bunch of other things that were just beautiful on dealing with human behavior in the workforce and how to get everybody back to being on one team. But it all started with the fact that you have to recognize you have a problem. And I think that's where, when people talk about German engineering and building those cars and they come off the line perfect, the humans are checking the robots, not the other way around. Before, we used to use lasers just to put a laser along a line and say, okay, that thing's perfect. Now get it off the line. Now we have a human look at it to make sure the human doesn't get repulsed by what they're looking at.
Right. So the rise of robots and AI, I mean, rise how much higher? I mean, it's already embedded all around us. And I don't think that's the problem. So no, I would absolutely argue that we should proliferate it even more. Because we don't have it.
This is a part of the Pirate Party platform?
No, you know what, man? I've said this before and I'll say it again. Those people couldn't take the time to actually engage in a meaningful conversation, both at the state and the federal level in the US. It's much bigger in Europe, particularly Scandinavia, where they take it seriously. Here, I think people just want to be part of a cool hacker subculture, but they maybe can't make it to DEF CON, I guess. I don't know. And
or the people out there and they can't make it.
I mean, listen, this is how I don't even, I lost the word I wanted to use, and I don't want to use any more expletives because I'm really trying hard here. But I went to a restaurant, and it so happened that the bartender was interested in the Pirate Party, and I talked to that guy in one night more than I've ever been able to talk to anybody that's officially part of the Pirate Party. So no, I'll make my own party.
Oh, so you're coming up with your own political party?
Yeah.
What's it going to be called?
I have no idea yet. I haven't thought about it. I just came up with that idea. Give me a minute. Shit makes sense. That's what it's called. This shit makes sense.
This shit makes sense.
That'll never work.
Look. Yeah, I know. Look at what's going to happen, man. We're going to yet again switch to a polar opposite extreme that serves nobody's best interest except that person. I don't think that's healthy.
So this all came up because when we were talking offline, the CNN had this article about essentially the weird platforms that candidates are running under, and one of the sections is called "Guard Against the Rise of Robots and AI," and John Delaney and Andrew Yang are listed under that as two candidates that believe that we need to do this. And one of them, Jason, has said he's going to vote for.
That's not what I said. I said I like the guy. I didn't say I was voting for him. I mean, I think Andrew Yang has some interesting points, and I view him kind of as an upgraded Gary Johnson. He generally strikes me as middle of the road libertarian, which I did. But what are you talking about?
I didn't really look into it.
Of course not.
That's the section that CNN has on the clip. I mean, there's tons of other sections, but this is just one of the sections. Of course, there's also the section on guarantee a job, which Andrew Yang is on there, and then there's another section for guaranteed childcare. That's Elizabeth Warren. Target the wealth. Of course, they don't mean themselves. I guarantee all politicians are exempt from this. But Bernie Sanders wants to tax wealthy people at 77%. I think that'll fly.
Well, it worked. I mean, it did in the past.
If you're going to pick an outlandish number, at least make it a prime number.
Yeah.
Right. Give it some significance.
73.
Yeah. And then let's see. Mayor Pete, who's out here in South Bend, the big clown shoes guy. Him and Elizabeth Warren want to redo the entire U.S. government system, abolish the Electoral College, get the Supreme Court justices to 15. They want to make sure that nothing ever gets done.
Didn't we already try that back in the Supreme Court and it got shot down by the Supreme Court? Like when Roosevelt tried to do it because he wanted to put Abe Froman and a bunch of his cronies on there and guarantee that he got his way for the next 30 years.
Well, the Senate can determine how many there are.
Right.
So, I mean, in the event that either party, got to, I think it's 66%, then they could put on and pack the Supreme Court however they want. But I don't think that we'll see a 66%.
No.
Again, I mean, I think it's going to stay closer to, just barely over
razor margins.
Yeah. So, yeah, it'll always be Supreme Court justice is any justice. Anything that happens along party lines is going to be essentially done by the one or two votes that are whichever party's in power at that moment.
Right.
All the more reason why we should have the pirate party.
Now, I think Andrew Yang has managed to get involved in major debates, which an independent third party hasn't traditionally.
Well, he's running as a Democrat.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I mean,
I thought he was running as a libertarian candidate.
According to CNN, he's running as a Democrat. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what else is there? It's black and white, or it's alt right, or extreme left.
I'd be willing to bet if we polled the majority of Americans, they wouldn't even know that the Libertarian Party exists, or if there was a third party.
I would probably tend to agree with you.
Well, but that's the old adage of Jay Leno, or always walking out man in the street, and or the meme that says, if you know who these people are and it's the Kardashians, but you don't know who these people are and it's the Supreme Court justice, you're the problem, right? I mean, it's people taking being misinformed or uninformed to a Zen-like art.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know that it's unfair to say that culturally we've tended to have an anti-intellectual position.
I don't even know if it's anti-intellectual, right? I mean, you start, and all public schools are different, but I think from what I've seen, I've got a 14-year-old and 20-year-old that the further we've moved away, certainly from the early 80s when I graduated high school, we've gotten more into social studies. Yeah, exactly, the 1880s. We've gotten more into social studies and less into civics. And at some point, if you want people to understand and respect the form of government, you have to teach the nuts and bolts of that government. And I think we probably get a lot of feedback from individual teachers and certain school districts that are doing that. But we have a nationalized education system. If for no reason, then federal funding is tied so much to certain types of performance that I think that there's a lot or much less prevalent hardcore civics being taught.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And it's counterintuitive to me. I mean, think about how much money and labor and energy goes into like driving education, because it's such a fundamental part of your experience as a human being. And yet I would argue over the course of your lifetime, perhaps your civic duties are much more important and probably have a much wider ranging impact.
Well, if you want to put your tinfoil hat on, or that type of behavior, you can also say, hey, if we take 2 or 3 generations of young people and we don't teach them how the mechanisms of government work, when somebody stands up and says, of either party, and says, hey, I'm the president, I'm just going to start signing executive orders and making decisions, nobody stops him, because largely the media agree with them, or the people that can come out en masse and disagree with somebody, and largely that's the media, right, or other politicians, and they just let it fly. It's not because that guy's trying to be anything but who he is. You don't accidentally get to be the president without having some, aggressive love of self and power, right?
Right.
That all of a sudden now you don't have everybody sitting in a restaurant, sitting in a bar going, wait a second, I don't think it's the way this government's supposed to work, right? And my personal opinion is Congress has been negligent for the last decade, because the House, they've only got one fundamental responsibility, and that's to craft and pass a budget every year. And we haven't done it, right? And that affects tech companies, that affects everybody, because you look at all the small tech companies that can't make inroads into selling into the federal government because they can't sustain the lack of financial certainty. Right, and it goes everywhere else. Why do you think the Turkish are trying to buy those? I think they're S-440 missiles, or whatever missiles they're trying to buy from Russia. It's not because they don't want to buy them from us. it's because there's no certainty what goes on in Congress and whether there'll be a policy that will allow them to get that missile system. Right? They're not trying to be bad players in the world stage. I mean, certainly they're elected, their leader is right now to a certain extent. But in general, countries that are somewhat friendly to us or friendly to the West, when they go buy this stuff, whether you like the guys or not, the leadership of China is not changing. The leadership of Russia is not changing, and they can get some certainty around that. And it melts itself down back to the U.S. and the fact that little startups can't get past the innovation phase if they want to sell something to the Fed space, or they're being told directly. I went to a conference in San Francisco that was adjacent to RSA, and the head of these innovation things are like, well, all you young on tech, tech smart entrepreneurial companies, go partner with one of the big people, the big boys that we've already vetted, right? And he was very specific about the fact that, the onus of, whether it's the booze, the khakis, all the big players that are selling years, we spend so much time vetting them and put so many onerous rules on them that they're a quasi-government entity with, how much you can pay somebody, how much you can charge for a good or service. And so without proper budgeting and, which goes back to the citizenry not holding the elected officials accountable for what they're supposed to do. I mean, it's just, and my personal opinion is that the 24-hour news cycle is what's created this, because now everybody's got to have a soundbite. If you look back to the founders, they came up with the Senate, right? And the not particularly the Senate, but how long each person was a senator was to make the Senate the deliberative body. You don't like your roads and potholes, go yourself a new congressman. You don't like foreign policy, go yourself a new senator. We've tilted that on its head because every time somebody walks out of their office or a chamber in Congress on Capitol Hill, you stick a mic in your face and you make them try to have something interesting and intellectually engaging to say. And it's just too hard now because there's too many issues out there.
Right. Well, and I think that's a byproduct too of becoming a global population that's so interconnected. I mean, when you're competing at such light speed to disseminate information to get clicks because you're a business and you need to survive too if you're a news outlet, right? You can't take the time to actually perform investigative journalism. You just have to disseminate that information, which is just relaying, right? It's not journalism anymore, in my opinion.
No, there's no journalism out there anymore.
Oh, you can't curate, right? I mean, I think that's a good way to look at it. You can't curate your own news because the cycles are too fast. I totally agree with you. Spot on, man. And at the same time, we still have this weird, perverse idea that people can't change their minds or shouldn't based upon new evidence being presented. The whole idea of, that they're a flip-flopper.
Right.
I mean, I would rather have people change their minds and stop just voting based on whatever party line is there. You're a representative of a larger population, and you don't have to deal with the Republican Party. The Democrat Party is not what got you elected. The people of the state you represent are. Start voting with their interests in mind, not your political party.
Well, and I think that's what's dangerous, man, is somehow over the last, I mean, at least a couple decades that I've been voting, let's say, right, and active in government as a participating citizen, somehow we've gotten this conflation of the notion of somebody that's, say, slimy and flip-flops because they're just going where the money is, right, with somebody that's actually changing their mind because they've been presented with a better example of something or evidence for something being different. And at this point, to me, it's completely indistinguishable why somebody's actually changed their mind, whether they're just following the special interest money or they actually changed their mind because they were wrong or something's more right. I mean, that's not the same thing, but you know what I mean?
Or maybe their constituents blew up their office and said, hey, I want you to vote this way. I mean, I know that didn't happen. I'm not sure people do that anymore. When I was living in Maryland, I had this representative that I was constantly emailing. And of course, I always got the form letters back. And, especially when it came to the Patriot Act being passed, I'm like, do not vote for this. Of course they all did. I think including myself and what's his name? Was it Strom from South Carolina said he read the Patriot Act and he was the lone dissenter.
Yeah. I think that's right.
The only two at the time that read the Patriot Act.
Speaking of Civil War veterans.
Yeah. But
he always sounded like Foghorn Leghorn when he got up and started talking, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Listen, man, there's some generations down here that, as a Yankee, like first of all, I'm sure they view me with a healthy dose of skepticism, and it's simply because the minute I open my mouth, I get the comment, "Oh, you're not from here." No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Oh God, I got that, man. I went and got my hair cut a couple weeks ago, and I was sitting there, and a bunch of people were there, and they grouped around me. I was sitting in the chair getting this nice undercut done. Look at that, man. Look at that. Shit, that looks good. And they're all like, "Oh, you're not from here," and they're like mystified. I'm like, no, I'm not the only one.
Try living in South Bend.
Oh God.
And wanting people to just, I don't know, work.
Not talk about football.
But think about this. And I don't know if the exact number, but less than 20% of Americans have a passport.
Right.
Right. And when people are, either inside the U.S. when it comes to voting or anything else, get myopic about their particular one little thing and don't have a view that's larger than their neighborhood, right? How do we get there? Right? Friends and things. I haven't seen all of America. Why do I need to go anywhere else? Well, if you go mostly anywhere in America, it's a little bit on either side, but it's mostly the same. Like, go out and do something that's completely different that you've never seen before, and challenge yourself, right? And
I've been to Canada.
The Canada. I've been to the Canada. I went to Mexico on spring break, that kind of thing, right? But I mean,
do you think more people are going to have to? Because what is it? There's like 8 or 9 states that don't conform with the Federal ID Act. They're going to have to pretty much get a passport if they're even going to get on the plane. Well,
no, because they're pulling a fast one. For example, Virginia is one that is in the process of doing this. And it always baffles me when the state that's most closely associated with DC is the last in line to do anything. But I got a new driver's license a year or so ago, and they just got to think, "Oh, you got to come get a new ID again." It's a revenue generator, right?
Right.
And, or because we just didn't see that coming, right? And we could have easily said, "Hey, it's like those things just make me go apoplectic." But when I ordered a passport, I got a passport card. And I end up now using the passport card traveling throughout the U.S. Number one, it doesn't have to have my address on it, which I like because nobody knows exactly where I live. Not that they don't already, because I'm a TSA pre guy, right? But there's, I don't know. Again, it's just you get if you tell me, back when the healthcare debate was going on, and everybody wanted to use Denmark or Switzerland. Well, they got 5 million people, right? You tell me to go fix something in New York City and confine it just to New York City, I might have a good shot of it. But if you take 350 odd million people in 6 time zones and the dysfunctional bureaucracy, that's when we have problems at anything, right? And the whole concept of voter ID, whether you agree with it or not, it's not hard to execute. You know how I know it's not hard to execute? Because when the Indians decided they were going to finally start having free and unimpeded elections, they said, "Wait a second, that's in 5 years. That's pretty quick. We might want to start working on it now." And they issued everybody an ID. They brought kiosks to the people and made it simple. We have a thing in Virginia Beach called the neuter scooter, and it'll take you. It's a big RV, and it goes around and it neuters pets, right? Mm-hmm. We can figure out a neuter scooter, but I can't get a van to come around and take somebody's picture and hand them an ID to make sure that we can legitimately account for every American to get them involved in the process, right?
Racist.
Stop. Just stop. Just behave. I knew you were sitting there. I could tell on your face while I was looking at you. That was going to be the high-end intellectual thing you were coming out with right there. Right?
That is going to be that is their answer every single time.
I hear you, but doesn't that you just I want to just put my hands in the air and say, you guys, people, make it stop, right? I mean, we have pretty decent voter participation here, especially contested political elections and things like that. But
in Virginia Beach or
in Virginia Beach, we're even on oddball elections. Where somebody leaves out, like we had a local elected official step down, and people are involved. It might not be 100% participation, but it's not, 2 people, 10 people in that little voting district decide the next city councilman, right? And I think right now with the size of government, there's a feeling of, well, whatever I do, it's not going to make a difference, right? And I think certainly the last last few elections, we're getting closer and closer, right? And I think to a certain extent, you watch some of the churn we have. It's because, especially Congress, not the Senate, but the House in particular, so many people, it's easier to get elected to the House than it is the Senate, even just by raw numbers. But the grassroots thing you can do, it's a smaller population that you have to interface with and all these things. And once they get elected, they forget what they're actually supposed to do. They have an agenda, and the agenda is sometimes inconsistent with the office they've been elected to. We recently had a congressman. He was one term. He probably should have stayed for as long as he wanted to. But when he stopped thinking about the district, he was out of the district more days than he was in the district. And it's Virginia Beach. It's a 3-hour car ride. It's not like he lives in California or anything like that. He was out of the district more than he was in the district because he wanted to focus on foreign policy and things like that because that's what he was comfortable with. How you stay elected in Virginia is to worry about defense dollars and show up on the rubber chicken circuit every weekend. All right. Well, he was worried about defense dollars. He wasn't worried about the latter. And so it was easy for the Democrats to come here and pump a lot of money in to get him out and to vote somebody else. And I was talking to another friend of mine that had been a congressman, and they're friends. And I go, well, how did he not get elected? Because he wanted to travel the world on all these junkets to go over to other countries. He didn't want to send to the district. And this guy this former congressman lived out in the upper Pacific Northwest. And he used to get on a plane and fly home every other weekend. And sometimes every weekend. He'd be leaving on a Friday, coming back on a Sunday night. So he doesn't miss votes, right? And that's, what job are you assigned to do? And let's do that well. And then you can start trying to stretch your legs. And that's where, people will get disgruntled and vote you out really quickly.
Well, and with technology, participation at that level should be trivial at this point. I mean, look at us doing this podcast essentially virtually, right? Why do I have to leave my constituents to have a vote in Congress? Man, you can put a little iPad up with my name above it, and my face is there, and I can see everybody, and you can see me, and I can cast my vote.
Right.
Now I'm representative.
Biometrics and things like there was a company that they do, and I won't mention the name, but they do vote. They do voting, right? They'll run union elections. It's like I always think it's like an upscale version of SurveyMonkey. Yeah. Because you can do election. No, literally. I mean, they teachers unions use them. Labor unions and stuff like that to cast their vote, right? They were looking for a new CEO, and one of my friends said, "Hey, why don't you go interview with them?" And so I had talked to them, and when I talked to them, I came in there and said my piece, and when I walked out, I never heard back from them again. And I was like, "Well, okay, even if you don't want me, that's you're not. No wonder you're needing a new CEO because you have no basic manners, right?" And so I reached out to the person that had gotten me to them, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's not right. Let me call." And what had happened was I scared the daylights out of them because they wanted to go from, $2 million of revenue to 5, and I wanted to change the world because when I looked at their basic platform, we spend so much time. Like I said, how did we start it off? Is like, I'm bringing this with me to the island, right? Well, let's make this immutable. Whether we say it's through blockchain technology or whatever technology, let's make the app immutable for calculation of thing. And they just like, no, we just want to get a little bit better. I'm like, no, I want people, I want everybody to be able to get on this and vote. Right. And, we need to have people there. We need why? Why do I need to have people there? I don't need to go to a bank to conduct business anymore. Right. They trust me enough that it's with the right credentialing, it's my money and everything like that. So we're getting better at that. Right. As a technology community, we're getting much better at making immutable what transaction you do, whether it's financial or any other transaction.
Yeah, I think the bank is a great example. I mean, we have USAA, dude. I don't have a physical bank, and I haven't been in a physical bank even before USAA. I couldn't tell you. Probably early 2000s. Probably to go get my $20 to go see The Matrix in 1999.
You were just at a bank a couple of months ago.
I was in an office of a bank. I wasn't in a bank. Man, if I ever told you, speaking of banks, here, a little aside real quick, levity. You know my dad was a janitor, and he used to clean banks. Did I ever tell you the story my brother locked himself in the vault one time?
No.
Like, talk about trust, right? Times, not all the time, but sometimes the inside of the vault where the safety deposit boxes and stuff were needed to be cleaned. And so the bank president would unlock it for my dad. I mean, this was like an old school big vault with the big wheel, right? And it was just me, my dad, and my brother. My brother's 3 years older than me. And the president would unlock it, open the door, and leave, and just tell my dad to close that big heavy door when he was done. And I don't know what my brother was thinking, man, but he went in there and pulled the door closed. Oops.
Was it on a time lock or anything? Or was it before that?
I don't know if it had a time lock. I know what the immediate solution was. My dad had to call that bank president and explain that his dumbass son just locked himself in the vault.
You could have just left him in there overnight.
I don't remember what I was doing, man. I might have been sitting in the corner laughing, but
I would assume you would be. If one of my siblings did that, I would go immediately to that posture.
yeah. But anyway, man, you're right, though. I mean, we figured it out certainly with financial transactions. I mean, just look at the concept of debit as opposed to credit.
Right.
And not only have we figured out how to do it in a trusted way, the fraud detection systems are so advanced. Like, I just got a new debit card. I have no idea who got compromised where, and I don't have to give a shit about it. USAA took care of it for me, issued me the new card, and it's sitting here, and I can take care of it whenever I want. Right. And I don't have to worry about losing any money whatsoever.
I have Navy Federal, and they are on it.
Yep.
Their fraud detection is bad as a bone.
Well, and for whatever reason, well, I mean, I do know the reason. Banks have been leading the forefront of security because there's a lot of people get a little bit crazy when some bad things happen to their money.
Yeah.
But I mean, the aspect of having multi-factor authentication to gain access to your money has basically been around since when did when did an ATM card come out? 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's always been there. And if a small banks, large banks in general can figure out how to assure that it's you through a reasonable certainty that you're making a financial transaction from your phone, from a mobile app, that it was you, then you would think we could do, I don't know, voting and things of that nature through our phone or something along those lines.
Right. And then, then that's when the tinfoil hats come out. Well, okay, if it's good enough for my money and everybody transacts daily, whether they realize it or not, even if you set up auto bill pay or anything like that. I mean, that's the level we've gone with financial. Like, hey, I just load all my bills in there and let it be taken care of. And I have, actually, I think the transaction that gets me the most now is going to get gas. How many of you take the receipt, actually check it? And like, how many of you just trust blindly that the number of gallons that it said it pumped is actually in your car, right? That
right.
Little, all of those, think about the confluence of all the different things that go on. One, that the amount of gas that it says it is up there, it actually went in your car. That, the financial piece is going to go to the bank. It's going to go through 7-Eleven or wherever you get your gas, and everybody's, they're going to get their penny or two for pumping the gas. And that whole transactional chain is automated now, right? And but you have implicit trust in that.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I can't tell you the last time I actually took the printed out receipt or asked for one. I usually hit no, because what do I need a receipt for?
Right. I can go look at my account.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And unless I get bumped in the head really hard and like start losing my thing, oh yeah, I was at a restaurant last night. I spent about $60. That seems right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
The only time I would say I get a receipt because there's a discount to the car wash across the street from it. But outside of that, I need the code. There's only check because I don't get the receipt, because there's been several times where, especially because it gets a little bit cold here in South Bend. So when you put the pump on, it stopped. Go, I get out of the car, go put the pump back in the handle, and I get back in the car, and I'm like, start driving. I'm like, wait a minute, I only got a half a tank of gas. So the check winds up happening after the fact. Going, wait, I should have had a full tank. So I looked, all right, did something happen? Well, yeah, what happened was it was too cold. The thing slipped, but there's the check, but it happens after I'm already down the road.
Well, I mean, this goes back to what TK was saying about the human detecting deviance from norm, like with auto manufacturing. We're so good at like these financial transaction automation routines that we only have to detect an approximate wrong to know that something's wrong. You know what I mean? You're not sure that something's off. It just looks off, right?
Yeah. No, the only thing I don't have automated is my child support payment. I want to feel the pain of putting that in every time.
There's a deep metaphor there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and here's another idea. Like, we're really good in high schools and junior highs about having college fairs and job fairs and military recruiting fairs. Why don't we have civics fairs? Even if it's a third party putting it on, it's a nonprofit. Just talking to young people about what it is to participate as a citizen. I mean, look at tutoring. Tutoring exists because the schools don't want to do their job of teaching, right? Same idea.
Do you think the schools aren't? All right, that gets into a different question. I don't know that the schools don't want to do their job of teaching, but is it that they're only providing the basic set of tools, and it's now up to the individual and the parents in order to expand upon that?
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead. So I'll use Virginia Beach as an example. The Virginia Beach public school system, which, in full disclosure, my children were not participants, right? The Virginia Beach public school system is they're extremely good at two things: special needs. They have unbelievable special needs programs, and we have an unbelievable set of academies for gifted kids, whether it's an international baccalaureate program, a math and science academy, a science and technology academy, a languages academy, and an entrepreneurship academy, and so on, health sciences and that stuff. I think across the U.S. today, if you're in that 85% of the population that's in the middle, good luck. Right? There's a basic level we're going to tend to, but we really want the smart kids to be smarter, and I think it's a great public duty to make sure that special needs kids are taken care of, because most countries don't do it very well. And
so you're saying they take care of the extremes and they forget about the middle,
right? But I think that's and it's not that in the school system, the schools are good. Like, you can get a good public education in Virginia Beach, right? But the focus is, there's one of the high schools. We have 11 high schools in Virginia Beach, and one of the high schools does not have an academy, but it has the most AP classes you can take. Coincidentally, it's probably the public high school with the highest median income of any. We have 7 or 8 zip codes, and everybody, where do you live? Oh, I live in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I live in 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Right, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the biggest population base now. They stopped delivering babies at Beach General and built a new hospital on our side of town. I mean, again, it's statistics and math gone awry. Like, we don't want to drive across town. Let's build a hospital here. And so you tie federal funding through standardized testing through this, and at some point you stop teaching kids, giving them the wonderment of learning, and you start teaching them the test. Right? And I truly believe that. It's one of the reasons that we sent our children to private school, was because they're not teaching the test, and they're requiring kids to think and to learn. And I don't think all public schools are bad, and I don't think all private schools are good. You have to shop around. But if you know as a parent what you want an outcome to be, you can and you have the resources, you can certainly help shape that outcome.
Well, I 100% emphatically agree, and that's what I was going to say, Dan. I don't think public school's bad. I'm a product of public education.
We all are, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I did all my university work at private schools, but my elementary, junior high school's all public, and I saw the evolution of this. And Dan, you and I were the generation where standardized testing got introduced.
Yep.
And it serves a purpose, but to me, it's the same problem you have with a federal government, the way it's implemented right now for us, is that you're trying to represent a population that you can't manage, right? Like, it's a real question that I think needs a serious debate. Why do we even need a president at this point? How does one person represent 350 million? That's a little bizarre to think that's actually accurate, right? But anyway, so with the influx of having whether you're a congressperson or a public high school administrator for a huge, think of like Los Angeles Unified. That's a massive school district, right? And there's a superintendent. That's one person representing all that. And his entire livelihood is attached to those federal dollars. What's his incentive? Well, his incentive is to make sure those federal dollars continue to flow. And I'm not begrudging him that. He has a family to feed too, right?
Well, okay, I'm gonna tilt this on its head. If you go back to by the time where you guys were, I'll say victims of the standardized testing system, that they were trying to implement that shortly after I got out of high school, right? And so what they did, Massachusetts, where I grew up, it started. They were kind of at the forefront of wanting to do this. And so what they did is they said, well, we're gonna test all the teachers, right? And anybody that wants to argue with me that a public teacher should not take an exam to prove competency, I'll laugh at them till the day I die. Because I think the most important thing we do is make sure the next generation of inhabitants are not complete dumbasses. But yet if and I'll say the thing, you consider yourself to be a blue collar worker or a professional. I'm like, we're a professional. Like, I agree. Pilots take competency testing. Professionals of higher education, lawyers, doctors, they have to do CEUs and everything to prove that they're competent over time.
Even accountants.
Right. Even accountants. Right. And so the teachers unions across the country threw a fit. Now, I would say that in Massachusetts, they executed the first testing incorrectly, and that drove a lot of the miscreant behavior from educators. Is they said, we're going to give every teacher the same test. Well, if you're a K through 8 teacher, that's different than a subject matter teacher in high school. And I will go. My father, I think, was correct when he said this, that every teacher should have, high school teachers in particular, should have to take whatever subject they teach plus English, because you should not only be corrected on your grammar and English in English class, right? And they failing to get the actual educators assure their competence through testing, and then attach the federal dollars through that competency. They said, well, then legislators across the country are like, well, what can we do? Well, let's test the students, right? And then you're saying, hey, I've got kids that either have real high functioning home environments and their parents are making sure they do their homework, all the way down to, you look in the Los Angeles Unified, for example, they have green dot schools now. Those green dot schools, I think Drew Carey and some other famous people got together and they said, hey, what if we take this educational model and turn it on its end? The schools that they had gotten the city to give them effectively were essentially holding pens for the penal system.
Yeah.
And they said, we're going to take a different approach to it. Told all the teachers they can come back and take a test, and if they pass, we're going to pay you demonstrably more, right? And they're high functioning. They treat students of every walk of life as if every utterance that comes out of their mouth matters, and they hold them accountable for their actions because they don't have 35, 37 kids in a class. You get down into a manageable size where if one student's a miscreant, it doesn't set everything off for the rest of the day.
Right.
But I think that's the bigger problem right now is, and some of it's parental apathy. I think that's, teachers always think, no, I think parental apathy is the number one, especially in most public education. If you're going to look at a problem, when I was a kid, if I got a bad grade, it was my problem. I had a friend of mine, she had been a Spanish teacher at one of the high schools, and she got tired of parents coming in. She goes, why'd you give my son a D? I didn't give him a D, he earned it. He worked his tail off to get that D. Right? By not showing up, right? Or a B or whatever, right? But this concept that if something bad happens to my child, it's somebody else's fault. I think that plays into it all. I mean, it's not, and again, you're talking 350 million people, every problem becomes magnified. Because if you say, hey, fix the Virginia Beach school district, we have a big school district. But again, you're asking me to fix one thing. You're not saying apply this to a national solution, and that becomes the issue. Well, and then everybody's got to be on either end of the spectrum, right? We can't even agree on the basic stuff.
So standardized testing is just like everything else in these certifications of anything. It becomes compliance. And whenever you try to just be compliant, the cost is magnified. Now, this is, when we do it in security, you do it with anything. If you do the right thing and you're trying to learn the right material, a result will be you're compliant or you will pass the test. But when I teach just to the test, that's why I need all these federal dollars, because it costs more to teach to the test than it would be to just say, these are the outcomes you're supposed to have, and let me figure out a way to get there. And it's with CISSP, your MCSE, your A+ certification, whatever. Any of these things, this is how it happens. People just wanting to be compliant. It costs 2 to 3 times the amount of money, and the result is they forget everything that was on that standardized test.
Right. The party of the authorizing or the controlling party gets to go, oh, look what we did. We've got a number, right? We've got a standard, right?
Right.
But I think in life, and I both of you over the time have probably heard me say this, most people walk around life wanting to appear to be competent, and they spend all their time in the appearance of competency. Why don't you just slow down a second and go become competent?
Amen.
Right. And that's, and we've all worked with people, had people work for us. So you're like, on the surface, that guy's like, seems like he's really got it together, or she's got it together. But when you get down to it, it's like they're just treading water, trying to be that B- C student, so that they're good enough to stay, but they're not so good you really actually impose any trust and confidence in them to do anything of merit.
Right. Yeah.
The middle of the pack. They just want to be middle of the pack. They're not looking to get out of that. They don't want to be better. They're complacent.
So let me ask you guys a question, both having been college educators. At my daughter's high school, they have an honor council, and it's a peer group of kids, right? And I think it's complete crap at the high school level, because having a 17 or a 16-year-old tell a 15-year-old what they should do in school there's not enough emotional maturity there, right? And the people that actually volunteer and want to be on the honor council, in my mind, are not the people I want telling my kids what to do. But the excuse I get at the high school level is, well, when they go to college, this is what they're going to have. And if your kid goes to UVA, if they go here, they go there. I said, I get that, but my thought process is, hey, having a 22-year-old talk to an 18-year-old about how to make adult decisions when you're paying X amount of dollars to go there, and what the outcome is at the end of that time period, is much more effective and a much more good use of time than letting some little 15 or 16-year-old feel superior over another 15 or 16-year-old. Because I think at the high school level, it becomes counterintuitive. What do you guys think?
I agree. And I think it's actually more insidious than that. There's a serious problem, and I'll add this really to your parent apathy comment, is we've overloaded our children with the appearance of adult-like responsibilities when they just want to be fucking kids, man. I mean, right? I mean, how busy are kids now? There is no time to be a kid and just live and learn. And there's a psychologically and cognitively, there's a massive difference between 17 talking to a 15 and a 22, 23-year-old talking to an 18-year-old. You're talking about a completely different human being. And I agree with you, man. Like, we got a babysitter, thank God, lives just across the street, that's part of the family. And she's like 16, right? Fun girl, super smart, trustworthy. When my daughter's older, I don't want her telling her what to do. I want her to babysit. If I want to find somebody to impart some, let's say, young wisdom to my daughter, I'll go get one of my college students to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that as well. We are putting so many responsibilities on these kids that I think it's setting them up for failure, because they don't have a safe place to learn fast. There is no room for any of it. They are under constant pressures from everywhere, and everything they do is now magnified because of social media. You name it. There's no way that they can that they can be a kid anymore and experience any type of setback, because it's magnified.
Exactly. And I was just going to say that exactly, man. The learning value of an error has been overloaded to the point where it's too disastrous.
Yeah. So here's something that I'm thinking of doing with, because of my oldest son. So for a year, I have been telling him, because he graduates high school very soon, if you don't have your driver's license, I'm selling this car. You're not going to have it. Here's the quote from Kelly Blue Book Instant. Man, it took pictures. This Subaru Crosstrek, not a bad car. Instant is, $12,450 that Kelly Blue Book will send me a check for tomorrow. And he's not going to get his driver's license. Now, the reason why he's not getting his driver's license is because he didn't read the fine print, which is, in order to get your driver's license, the first part is you have to have your learner's permit. And for your learner's permit, it is not required for you to have driver's ed. However, you have to have driver's ed for your full license. In order to do that, you had to have your learner's permit for 90 days.
Right.
Now, my math's not all that great, but I'm pretty sure end of April to June 7th is less than 90 days. So this is what I'm thinking of doing to kind of teach him a lesson. I am, for his graduation, I'm either going to say, hey, here's $5,000, go do whatever you want with a car, but I'm selling the Subaru. Or I'm going to sell you the Subaru and you're going to go out and get a car loan for $5,000. And you're going to have to pay for it. This would be the time for y'all to respond.
I thought you were still going to go somewhere else with it.
No,
I don't know that I have any advice. My daughter's 4.5, man. I ain't got the problem yet.
But I'm thinking that the lesson is, hey, he's now having to pay for something he was going to get for free because he couldn't do what he was supposed to do. But at the same time, a 3-year car loan for $5,000 when something's worth 13, it's going to wind up building his credit at the same time.
Well, I think about it like this. That's a 3,000-pound weapon, right? That you're asking him to tend to, and if he doesn't feel comfortable enough, and it might just be because he's lazy, but I'm going to say more than anything else. And you guys both know my son Jared. He wasn't in a hurry to get his driver's license. He wasn't in a hurry because he didn't feel comfortable doing it. Whereas my little one, she turns 15 in September, and she knows the exact minute she can walk in the office and the DMV and go get her learner's permit, right? And I think sometimes on something like that, you can't force it, right? And yeah, he might be a little bit lazy, but he's also maybe hiding behind that just because he doesn't feel comfortable driving it. When I was in the military, I taught a guy at 24 how to drive a car. All right, we did it up on a dirt road in some Army base in Northern Virginia, where very, very low risk of him damaging anything. And that's where he got his start, because he didn't feel comfortable. And then he was always living in cities and he had an excuse not to do it. Maybe Danny's got that going on.
Well, you're right, man. I mean, we lose track that human cognitive development is on a continuum, and this is part of the standardized testing conversation too, right?
Right.
We try to, because we're humans, this is what we do as humans. We try to put things in neat little categories and say, if you're in this category, this is everything that you are, and that is not how the mind develops at all.
No.
At all. And I didn't get my driver's license until I was 17. I don't know that it's because I wasn't comfortable. Or what the case was. It was too long ago and I can't really think about it, but I didn't. Whereas I had friends, like you're saying, with your daughter, that got theirs as soon as they could. Well, I mean, we're different people. What else do you expect?
Right.
I mean,
well, now for him, when all of a sudden he's like, oh, it's coming around the corner, and then he starts doing all the research, because I mean, he's driven from Maryland to Indiana. He has no, I feel it's more the laziness part, because he just wanted to come home and play video games. And I'm like, hey, so then all of a sudden, this was basically last week. He's saying, oh, well, first part, Maryland learner's permit expired, so he couldn't go and do anything. I'm like, might be a problem. So then as he's learning all these things very quickly, because it's the last minute, he's like, I can't get this done. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Well, see, this is when I think about my daughter, this is how I think about it. The magic of childhood should be the ability to make mistakes with a safety net, right? And even biologically that's enforced. And that's why, like, for instance, young babies are so pliable, right? Their bones are soft, their bodies are limp, so they can fall down and not die. You know what I mean? Like, it's likely that if you and I trip, we might break something just because
No doubt.
Yeah, you know what I mean, right? Nature enforces
pull a hammy.
Don't break a hip, TK. We need you around for a while.
Right? I mean, nature enforces that, and so that we cognitively need those mechanisms too. And I don't know that there's a one size fits all in education. I don't know that there's a one size fits all in punishment or, lesson learning, whatever you want to call it. Man, I don't know.
It's funny because when I first joined the military, you guys know I was in the Navy. When I first joined the Navy, the young officers, right? You have an ensign, equivalent to a second lieutenant for people that aren't familiar with the Navy. We always say the ensign was the best word in the English language because when the ensign did something good, you're like ensign. When the ensign did something bad, you ensign. You had the rolled up newspaper. But the junior officers were allowed to make mistakes, right? Because how else are you going to learn to be a leader? And that's why you were given, you were given a chief. You were in the Marines. You were given a gunny that was right next to you that had 10, 12, 15 years experience because you're not learning how necessarily to be the next big leader. You have to learn the nuts and bolts of how your little codicil of the military works. And so they started they started applying the fitness report system more heavily down at the junior ranks. And some guy when he's an ensign makes a mistake, he's basically screwed for the rest of his career. It's like Eisenhower spent 14 years as a major. Right, today they'd be like, hey, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because of the time. And it's like, you're right, we do, even as young adults, when people get to the workforce, and both of you guys are educators of young adults, and certainly watching Dan having brought a lot of them into places that we worked, giving them hey, was Greg perfect when you first got him? No, but you know what, he showed up every day and worked hard. And the way that you learn is to go, ooh, don't touch that hot thing. Right? And I think we start to remove that because we want to put a safety net on life, and there isn't one. At some point, you got to jump out of the airplane.
Yeah. Well,
the funny part about Skippy there was, because he's quite bright kid, but he had interviewed at a lot of places and he could not get an internship. So I looked, he came over from Towson, and I knew some people over there. So I took him out to lunch. And I just said, as we're getting in there, I said, all right, I just have one question for you at the end. Who shot first? And since at that age, he knew that Han Solo shot first, because they'd already redone everything. I was like, all right, I'll give you a shot. And you know what? That kid worked harder than people who had straight A's and everything been given to him. He worked. And I would say the reason what I look for in any of these kids that I was hiring, I was looking for whether or not they had grit.
Yep. You just said the magic thing to me, like, oh, these kids that have straight A's, right? You know why we put a premium on getting straight A's in college? Because nothing else is important.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's, when nothing's important, everything becomes important. And I tell Jared, I said, go be a 3.5 student. Go out, have a life. I want you to go get a B in something because you went out and you were hanging out with your friends. You're communicating. You were growing in other ways that is not necessarily visible. Because after your first job, nobody's going to ask you what your GPA was to begin with. And if you got a 3.5 and you want to go to grad school or whatever, all those things are open to you. All right. But that quest, even with my young one, that quest for perfection, right, is sometimes daunting. And you're right, because now everything's in a hurry. Kids are working, they're up 24/7 doing something. That, hey, go hang out with your friends for a little while and develop socially. I mean, we used to call it sitting under the street light when I was a kid, right? When we'd go out in the street and we lived in a cul-de-sac, and all the kids would just hang out. When it got dark, we'd hang out under the street light. The younger kids had to go home. Plus, I think there was that informal adulthood, right? Because I think we had like 30 some kids between the ages of all school ages, first grade to end of high school. And, when I showed up, I think I was in 5th grade. And when I showed up to that neighborhood, we were automatically looking after the little kids, and the older kids were looking after us. And you latently got responsibility, because if something was going wrong, any of the adults would walk out and go, why are you letting them do that? They're going to get hurt.
Right. Exactly.
And it's low consequence responsibility development, right?
Well stated. Exactly.
Very true. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I got to bounce. I have a final I got to take.
Go take your final. Good luck with that.
Yeah. Supply chain. I'm sure it's important somewhere.
Is it a case study on Docker?
No, not a case study on Docker. I have no idea what the final exam is going to bring, but I would say the professor he's quite good, and he gave everyone, like, here is 6 pages of cheat sheets so you know where every formula is and examples of when you would use them. So but he's also so confident. He's like, yeah, go ahead and use the internet. Go ahead, it's open everything.
Yeah, that's always a tar pit.
Yeah, he's like, I don't care what you use. You want to Google it? Go right ahead. You're not going to find my stuff on Google.
I had an economics professor that gave a study sheet out, and it was questions and answers. And like 40 questions and answers were there. And I was like, study this, right? The next day, all he did effectively was white out the answers. And like 5 kids failed. He goes, this test was about just seeing if you'd like take the hint.
Yeah.
Right? He goes, in life, sometimes you just have to take the hint. We weren't trying to fool you. Like, this is all the stuff we talked about. And if you showed up and were moderately engaged, you'd realize, oh yeah, we talked about that. We talked about this. And he goes, and some of them were just like one or two word answers. And you still had 4 or 5 people that failed because they just didn't believe it.
Yeah. Right. You know? Yeah.
It's a surprise that the people who are best in the supply chain in the class happen to work for Ford, GM, Toyota, and some of these other manufacturing companies. They're really good at the supply chain stuff.
Yeah, their whole life revolves around JIT.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right, my friends.
Great.
Thank you again for the conversation.
Always a pleasure.
Yep. See you guys in a bit.
Yep. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Have a good week.